Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have August Turak here, and we're talking about his book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, One CEO's Quest for Meaning and Authenticity. So welcome again. We're here with another interview talking about your other book. So I'm excited to hear about your insights on business secrets. So welcome back, August.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back, CJ. I'm all fired up.
You are again. Woohoo! Okay. Okay, so tell me a little bit about, we talked about it before, but just as a refresher for folks who may not have heard the first interview, how did you end up finding yourself with a bunch of monks?
Well, it started with a accident. I broke my ankle in a skydiving accident. I have college students that I coach on spiritual and philosophical issues, and they taught me into going skydiving, and I smashed my ankle to smithereens in a not so 3-point landing. And I went into this crisis. I went into this terrible depression, horrible panic attacks, anxiety. I didn't know where they were coming from, and then suddenly I realized where they were coming. I was laying in a hospital bed with nothing else to do but think about how panicky I was, and it was because I was facing my mortality for the first time.
Mm.
And I realized I was not at all prepared to die. And it wasn't like my injuries were life-threatening, but I realized that one of these days, the doctor wasn't going to be saying, "You're going home on Saturday." He was going to be saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. Turek, but we've done everything we can for you." Then what? And this was what I was panicking about. And when I got out of the hospital, the panic went away. The depression got even worse. And I went into what I call now I talk about it in my book, the dark night of my 2-year dark night of the soul. And several months afterwards, I got a call from another one of my college students, and he said, "Augie, I wanted you to know that at least one of your students is taking your advice." I said, "What advice?" He said, "Well, you told us to do something meaningful with our summer vacation, not just chase girls and drink beer." And he said, "I'm at a Trappist monastery in South Carolina. I'm spending the entire summer here at Mepkin Abbey, a Trappist monastery. I'm a monastic guest." And I spoke to him. I'd known the guy for 4 years. His name was Josh Skidlaric. Not that it matters, but and there was something magical about his voice. Something had changed in this young man in just a month or so that he had been at Mepkin. And I just blurted out, "I got to come. When can I come?" And he said, "Let me ask Brother John." And that was the first time I ever heard Brother John's name. And Brother John said, "You can come down." He came back. He said, "Brother John says, come on down this weekend." So I went back that weekend and I was blown away. And I went back the next weekend and the next weekend and the next weekend. And so then I applied to become a monastic guest. So that was 1996. And I've been going there since 1996 as a monastic guest, which means you live with the monks, you eat with the monks, you go to work with the monks in their farming work, and get up at 3 in the morning with them. And you get a robe. They give you a special robe that monastic guests wear. And I'm proud to say that I now have a permanent one. I bring it home with me and take it down with me when I
Nice.
go. And so I've been hanging out with monks now for, over 20 years.
So you still go on these trips?
I was down there several months ago. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions from the listeners came, which was, um, do you ever get ready to so the initial accident brought on this fear of death, and the question from the listener is, are we ever ready for death? And since 1996 to now, do you feel like you're any more ready for death?
Um, yes, and it's actually I've talked to people about my book, and there's a section of my book that talks about my dark night of the soul, and people have written to me and asked me for more details. I'm thinking about writing another book uh, to just delve into that. But in the long story short, and after 2 years of spiraling down into this dark night, I had a spectacular spiritual experience that happened by accident or not by accident, depending on how you look, over Holy Weekend, between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, where I fundamentally died and was reborn. And
Hmm.
it was so catastrophic or tremendous, or what do you want to call it. It took me a whole year to really get my feet back on the ground. But here's what I will say. I will say that from the age of 14, this was in 1998. My accident happened in 1996. The spiritual experience happened in 1998. From my age of 14, I was in my late 40s by then. From the age of 14, I had battled depression on and off.
Hmm.
Uh, and I really kind of think that that the accident actually just blew the top off of all the things that had been haunting me all those years. I just didn't have the strength and the power
Mm.
to push that depression down anymore that had been creeping
Oh.
up on me. And since 1998 to today, I have never had one moment of depression, not one moment of anxiety.
Mm.
I've lived my entire life for the last 22, 21 years in joy, peace, and gratitude. And
Mm.
so I can't say that I haven't had to face my own mortality in that a dramatic a way since then. But I think that I am much better prepared for it now than I was then.
How are you better prepared?
I found God.
Ah, okay. So when you found God, it's like I know that there's something. When I die,
I,
it's not like I'm flatline turned to soil.
I know that I'm not alone.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And I mean, it kind of reminds me of Carl Jung, the great psychologist, was one time asked by an interviewer. He said, "Do you believe in God?" And he said, to the woman, it was a woman asking him. He said, "You're asking me the wrong question." And she said, "Okay, what is the right question?" She said, "Do I know there's a God?" She said, "Okay, do you know there's a God?" And he said, "Yes."
Interesting.
I
Okay. So you know that there is a
I
God.
know, I know.
So when you die, it's like no big deal.
Well, I'm not gonna. Well, yes. When I die, it's no big deal because frankly, I died already once.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that does not mean that the process of dying is going to be no big deal.
Right.
One of the reasons people talk about surrender, you started it before the show. You started talking about letting go, and we talk a lot about letting go and letting God and surrender. And I tell people all the time, I've been through it, ladies and gentlemen, and you cannot consciously surrender. You cannot consciously surrender any more than you can hold your breath and kill yourself by holding your breath. Your desire for life is going to overpower whatever intentionality you think you can bring to the process. Surrender is not something that you do, it is something that happens to us. It happens to us when we have completely exhausted all the other games that we think we can play, and we finally give up. But having said that, having lived through what I consider to be ego death, and people, that's another thing that people like to throw around. Um, it feels exactly like you're dying.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I
It isn't like, oh, this is kind of interesting. My
yeah.
ego's dying. I think I'll take a look at this. And no matter what anybody tells you or what you've read or how prepared you think you might be, um, so I believe that it's been 22 years since I went through that, and so you get your habits back and everything. So I think there'll be a process where I'll have to go back through it again and then remember that it doesn't really matter.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you about my journey, and perhaps you can offer some advice. And it's
And
so about 6 months ago, or when is it now? Yeah, July. About 7 months ago, I started not being able to breathe. I have no idea why, but I just not being able to breathe properly. And just like feeling anxiety that culminated in yesterday. I had a massage, and the woman gave me massage around my jaws, which is where I clench my jaws when I'm under stress. And it's, if you think about clenching your jaws, it's like I am like sitting there not letting go, like a dog chewing on a bone. Okay, so it hurt like hell. She sat
uh,
there and pressed on my cheek. She put her finger in my mouth and released my jaw, and it was so painful. The amount of tension in my face, and so I thought, wow, I've been holding that probably since January. It started in January when I could tell like I wasn't breathing fully, or like and it kind of has built up till a point in July or August where I'm literally in a shutdown. Like I have been like grouchy, irritable. No, there's been a lot of things that have caused that. I could point to lots of reasons why, right? Why my son's leaving for college on Friday. We're going to be empty nesters. We've decided to take a long trip to plan, and so there's like a trip and trip within trips, and it's all wonderful things, but there's often a lot of time of stress when you're taking a trip. And the trip that we decided to take is the Camino de Santiago, which is a 500-mile hike of which I've been preparing for. So this is kind of the backdrop of lots of
Hmm.
stress.
Yes. And
Okay,
how can I help you?
here I'm going to tell you.
My child, how can I help you, my
Okay, I'm
child?
going to tell you. So the first thing that I encountered was just physical pain. I'm getting plantar fasciitis, and this is kind of desperation to
I
know.
had that.
I was thinking of that with your ankle, where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to see this therapist, that therapist, this whatever, figure out what's happening, because there is a body component of physical pain, and there are a lot of people out there struggling with physical pain. You yourself went through physical pain. You jumped to death. I don't know if I'm jumping to that, but it's kind of a sense of despondency for like where you may go when you age and not being able to fix it, solve it. And I think whether it's a business problem, a physical problem, there you reach a juncture when you're like, I don't know. I've seen every consultant, therapist, massage therapist, maybe a psychological, energy, whatever. And you hit a point like, I don't know what to do. I have cancer, anything. So I'm sure you hit that point. And
Yes.
so when you hit that point, what did you learn at that juncture? What would you have told yourself at that juncture?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that everything I told myself at that juncture had no effect. In my particular case, I remember a friend of mine years before had told me, and I had to experience it myself. He said the problem with severe depression is you can't even imagine anything that would make you feel better.
Hmm.
And I got to a point of that kind of depression, of just really, despair.
Yeah.
But I would recommend a book to you and your listeners. It's called The Ego and the Dynamic Ground by Michael Washburn. And what
Egic and
he
the
really
dynamic
tried,
ground.
The Ego and the Dynamic Ground by this psychologist, Michael Washburn.
Okay.
And there's a lot to be that I could talk about in that book, but I don't really want
Yeah.
to, except I want to point out one thing that he says is that a lot of times and this was absolutely what happened to me. Um, and he tries to point out that a lot of times what people think of as psychological crisis is considered immediately a bad thing. He said it's not necessarily. He said sometimes it is, but not necessarily. He said it sometimes it means it is. I even said it in my book. I said sometimes what we think of as depression or despair or what all these things are merely God frustrating our lower desires in order to open us to a higher desire. When some people come to me and they want my coaching stuff, and it's difficult because it's a man who's lost his job and he's afraid he's losing his wife's love because she married him because he was a knight on a shining armor, and now he isn't the knight in the shining armor, and he's afraid of this. And what he really wants is he wants me to help him get back up on that horse. And I'm trying gently to say to him, no, the universe is telling you, you've done that. You really aren't a knight on the shining horse. You're something even more important than that. And the only way you're going to be able to realize that is this strategy's got to fail for you to finally give up on it and try something new.
Hmm.
And when the strategy that you've hung on to or you've been playing for many years, the game that I'm God's gift to women, or the game that I'm this Mr. Master of the Universe businessman, or whatever it is, that a lot of times suddenly that doesn't work anymore. You don't want to go to work anymore. You don't want to get out. You're not interested in women anymore, or whatever it is. That's a good sign. It's trying to tell you that there's bigger things, there's more important, there's spiritual things in your life that you probably haven't paid enough attention to over the years. And it's time for you to do that. So a midlife crisis, as Washburn talks about, he said, can be in a tremendous opening up. He goes so far in his book to say despair is a wonderful thing.
Hmm.
It is so painful and it is so unremitting that it's just about the only thing that can force the ego to admit to its own nothingness and guilt. Uh, um, so a lot of times, you can talk to people as much as you want, but a lot of times the only way people change is when what they're doing stops working. Think of an alcoholic, for example. When I get into AA a lot as an organization, and I have to always say, I've never been in AA. I'm not a drinker myself, but I really admire
Mm-hmm.
AA because what does AA say? You just finally get sick and tired of waking up in the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens to alcoholics. They finally have to get tired of waking up with their own puke on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche said the most critical or most important moment of your life is your hour of your own great self-contempt.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you get tired of your own nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
You get so sick and tired. I've been playing this game. I've been trying to get to heaven on a bottle of beer or whatever it is. It's not working. It never worked and it never will work. And it's a scary place to be because you don't see the new path clearly yet.
Mm.
It's just that the old path is not working anymore.
Okay, so I'm going to riff off of that. So I'm going to actually map this to the physical pain that I'm feeling and then see. I was actually listening to uh, 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 MP3 on Audible with John O'Donohue. And have you ever heard of him, the author John
No.
O'Donohue? The beautiful writer. He's uh, writes about, he's an Irish poet writer. And he was saying that each of us has an essence within us, and that's like our pure, unique beauty. And we also have our gifted with our fatal flaw. So the fatal flaw may be um, me wanting to have, like, be in my physical peak and healthy all the time, right? Even though that's not always going to be the case, right? So, or me wanting to be like the smartest person around. I just had a concussion, and that's definitely not been the case. Or you being the best business person, like whatever it is, we actually have a fatal flaw. Could have been like something that we were acknowledged and rewarded for, like you're saying, the handsome guy or the lady killer or whatever, or the smart business person. And he said, so we have this fatal flaw, and that flaw um, brings us, there's a point in which that flaw brings us confusion, anxiety, despair. And the way we get over that is to realize that in going into all of that, that beauty and our essence will shine through. It's kind of a different way of saying exactly what you just said, but to me, that really rang true. I never thought about it, but I think that when I think about the physical pain that I've been feeling, which has been like waking up at night, like my legs are killing me, right? And thinking like, okay, well, I'm not permanent, neither, my legs hurt. I'm undertaking a very physically arduous thing. And yeah, that's life. But the
Right.
struggle is trying to like, and the question that listener asked us, like, when do we know when to stop trying, or and so my formulas have been to go to therapists who say, okay, your feet have to be aligned a certain way because your body is not attuned in the correct way, which is causing you back pain, which is causing you knee pain. You need to get new shoes. Like everything that I'm doing continues to work, right? It's making it better. My feet are feeling less pain. Everything is kind of working in its order. So I'm apt not to like stop doing what I'm doing. So one of the questions is, but you hit a point, and maybe the lady killer guy hit a point where the strategies that they're using no longer work. Um,
Well, it's universal. I'm always looking for the universal. I mean, when in my other book, Brother John, A Monk, a Pilgrim, The Purpose of Life, which we talked about before, won the Templeton Prize. Templeton Prize was a 3,500 word essay. And I had to answer the question, what is the purpose of life? And I wrote about this story about Brother John, and I won the $100,000 grand prize. And what did I say that was the purpose of life in that essay? That self-transcendence.
mhm,
That we're all longing for self-transcendence. The answer to our problems are spiritual. And as long as we don't, and I didn't talk about this in any of my writing, but I remember when I was dating this girl and she had a little boy, and I got very close to her. He was only a toddler. And as he started to learn how to walk and talk, he became fascinated with cause and effect. So he would turn a light switch on, and that light would come on, and he'd turn to me and he'd say, "I did that," and he would argue with me if I was going to do. No, I did that. I did that. I did that. All he was saying all the time was, "I did that." So I did it, and I started thinking about that. Where's this all coming from? This is the development of his ego. There's an old Catch 22 book where this guy, one of the Colonel Cathcart, divides the whole world into what he calls black eyes and feathers in his caps.
Mm.
So when he does something wrong, he gets a black eye in his own mind. When he does something good, he gets a feather in his cap. And the whole idea is to get more feathers than there are black eyes. And I watched this little boy, and I thought, the reason he's getting he desperately wants meaning and purpose. And when he flips on that switch and the light comes on, the universe is saying, yes, I am listening. You are important. I am doing what you're asking me to do. You exist, you
Mm.
know. But when something went wrong, when he flipped the switch and the light
Mm.
didn't go on,
Mm.
then he would start to cry and he would get frustrated. Why? Because the universe is saying, you don't exist. I don't care about you. You're meaningless. You have no effect, etc. Now, we never grow out of this.
Mm.
So guys get identified with here's my business card. I did that. Or
Right.
even me having a book. I did that. I did
Right.
that.
Right.
But in the long run, the reason why as we get older, it starts sneaking up on us that the game is going to end at some point, and it ends with our physical death.
Mm-hmm.
And when the physical death happens, it's the universe saying, "Ha ha, game over. You don't exist. You never mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you did was a dream. Everything you did was a joke." And we're terrified of that.
Mm.
I talk about in another book it's not published yet. And I said about my old Zen teacher, I said he was the great disillusioner.
Mm-hmm.
I said, now let's look at the word disillusionment. I said, why has it got such a bad rap? I mean, what does it mean? It means just to lose your illusions.
Mm.
So why do we not want our children to be disillusioned?
Mm.
Because the fact is that deep down inside, we're terrified that if we lost all of our illusions, there would be nothing.
Mm.
That it's all, there's an old Bob Newhart TV show where he's going through a midlife crisis. He was a psychologist. So his wife he says, I think it's all a crock. I'm afraid it's all a crock. And she says, go back to your university and see your old mentor and he'll fix you up. And he goes and pours out his heart to his old mentor. And he says, well, Bob, you figured it out. It's all a crock. So his mentor tells him it's all a crock. So we're terrified that it's all a crock.
Mm.
And we're terrified of dying. So if you think there's a wonderful, wonderful book, again, I would recommend it to. I should be pushing my own books, but I'm not. It's called The Denial of Death, and it won the Pulitzer Prize back in the 1970s. Ernest Becker wrote it, and he said, and basically he makes a very, very strong case. Matter of fact, I consider it completely foolproof that all fears, eventually, if you follow them back far enough, are fears of death. There's
Mm.
only one fear. It's the fear of death. All anxieties, all insecurities, all nervousness, everything you think of goes back to a fear of death. Why are we afraid of the unknown? Because there's a tiger lying out there in the unknown
Mm.
someplace, and he's
Mm.
going to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
So all these fears are so you have to transcend. You have to get. It's one of the things that I'm giving lectures lately, and I've been talking to people. I said, we're going through a leadership crisis right
Mm-hmm.
now, and
Mm-hmm.
the reason why there's a leadership crisis in not only in America but in the West is because the first job of leadership, and I get into this very much in Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, the first job of leadership is to create a high overarching mission worthy of being served selflessly by other people. Our jobs as leaders is to articulate a mission, a big picture purpose that people can then give up, surrender their petty day-to-day concerns and serve it selflessly.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and I'm not the first person. Everybody, when you look around, when you see people, everybody wants to come up with a one-off explanation. Why are boys shooting up schools because of guns? Why are people taking opioids so much? Because the opioid companies are pushing them on them. Why are young men living in their parents' basements until they're 35? Why is there so much alcoholism? Why is there so much suicide? Why is there so much depression? Each one of these things, why are there the last thing, the Wall Street Journal, the loneliness epidemic. Vast numbers of people are living alone and they're dying of it. Our life expectancy has gone down for the last 3 years for the first time since they started keeping records. Why? Because of suicide and opioid addictions. And opioid addiction is just another form of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something terribly wrong. People do not have any higher purpose in their life. Leaders are, whether they're religious leaders or whether they're secular leaders, we are not providing people with something bigger,
Mm,
something just self-transcendence.
mm-hmm.
And so
Okay.
people are left with self-indulgence. And self-indulgence is a dead end. It
Hmm.
will never get you the psychological and spiritual satisfaction that you so desperately need.
Okay, wait,
So
stop. I need to actually.
that
I feel like we haven't really answered the initial question, but let me just. I think you have, but let me see if I can knit it together. Because my question was there were a couple of questions. Sally asked, so when we hit you know, depression, loss of job, loss of physical whatever, loss of physical mobility, which is or health issues, which is what I've been encountering. There is a sense of we need to keep on working on it, keep on working, and then we'll like work ourselves into a solution. This is kind of the mentality. And I think what your answer to that question was is that like how do we know when to stop? And I think what your answer was is like, first of all, we have to realize that it's a delusion that our ego keeps on saying, like, turn on the switch, turn off the switch. Like, we actually have some control over our lives. Is that what your answer is? I don't really, I'm trying to figure out what your answer is to the question that Sally asked earlier.
my answer is very, very simple. Things like that are going to happen to everyone and all people. Somewhere along the line, all those things. My answer is: have you done the 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 hard work, spiritual work that you need to have something to fall back on that is not based on just the physical universe. If the only thing that you have to fall back on is money, power, the things you would call control, you're cruising for a bruising
Mm-hmm.
because, and I found that out the hard way. I mean, I thought I'd been doing all this spiritual work for many years, but then when the rug got pulled out from under me in 1996, I found out that I had not. And I was relying on my own power, my own ego.
Mm-hmm.
And that we talked about that last time, and I talk about it in my business secrets that it's a becoming process. You don't learn things; you become the person you need.
Mm. Okay,
And,
so
and
I think the answer to Sally's question is her question was, so how do we know when to move on? The question is like figure out what question you're trying to ask, and if it's one of a material concern, that's one area to move on and figure out what the spiritual concern would be. I'm hearing that as one
yeah, but
answer.
I will say another thing that's implicit in the question, which I hear all the time. Sally, is that her name?
Hmm.
Is Sally alone? Is Sally trying to figure this all out for herself? Does Sally have a community of people she can turn to for advice?
Yeah.
Does Sally have a spiritual director, a spiritual teacher, a guru, or whatever you want to call it, that she can turn to for advice? 99% of the time that I've been working on this since I was a kid, since I was in college, we're Americans are completely alone with everything.
Mm.
We join group, we go to the gym and join Zumba classes or something. But then with the most important things of our lives, we're supposed to figure this all out for ourselves.
Okay, so that's the second answer. So Patty had said, "How do we figure out what will work for us?" So the first answer is figure out what the problem is. Is the problem that we just want everything to stay the same, which is what we're habitually wanting to do? I want my health to still the same. I want to be employed. I want to be a virile man, whatever. So ask what the problem is, and then ask deeper what the spiritual question is, and then when we do that. What did you just say? You just answered. Oh, then get help. Seek help. Ask what kind of support do we have out there. And
And the other thing is that I always say to people, I'll tell you, I gave a talk about the business secrets of the Trappist monks to the Environmental Protection Agency, or at least a big group of
yeah.
people from the Environmental Protection Agency, and I started taking questions from them. And after a while, I said, "Can I point something out gently?" And they said, "Okay." And I said, I've taken about 10 or 12 questions now, and pretty much the theme of all 12 questions is everything you're saying about service and selflessness and all this kind of stuff and spirituality is great. So how do I get my boss to change? How do I get the guy in the next cubicle to change? How do it's all me, 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 me. I just saw somewhere it said, it's not that happy people are grateful. It's grateful people are happy. The key to a
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling life is selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
It's the theme of my book, Business, and I'm going to put this right up here, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monk.
Yay.
It's selflessness.
Okay.
It's 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 being so um, you know being so overcome with love and with, like the monks are. I tell the story down there. I mean, Father Leonard was old man. He was a very brilliant guy. And all he did as an old man was scrub the floors all the time.
Yeah.
And he would sweat in the hot South Carolina suns. But no matter how hard he was working and scrubbing floors and doing basic janitor work, the man was brilliant, and he did janitor work all day, every day.
Mm.
And no matter how hot it was, and no matter how difficult it was, and when I'd walk by, he would give me this big grin and he would smile. And then his circulation in his legs gave way, and he had all these health issues. And he would answer the phone for the monastery, and because why? Because he could keep his feet up all day long and still be of service,
Mm.
helping. And then
Mm.
one day I tell the story that I'm sitting. My father had died 6 or 8 months earlier, and I was my first Christmas without my dad. And I'm getting myself a cup of tea in the kitchen, and suddenly I hear this, feel this hand on my shoulder. I whirl around, and it's Father Leonard, and he's walking with a walker by this time.
Wow.
And he said, um, he says, I want you to know that we never forgot you and your father. He said, we pray for you here every single day. I
Wow.
mean, that man who, no matter how much pain he was in, how old he'd become, and he died not too long afterwards, he was so tuned into me, because
Mm.
that's what I was thinking about. I'm standing there with a cup of tea, depressed because I'm thinking about my dad and it's Christmas.
Mm.
And this man was so tuned into other people, not to other people's pain, not to his own pain, not to his own struggles, but he was able to. And before I could even thank him or say anything or even have him see, he would already. I can hear it in my mind now, the clank, clank, clank of his walker. He was already moving away. He didn't wait to be thanked.
Mm. Yeah, so it's
Um,
it's it's not about asking for help from others. It's asking how it's going back to what you're saying, which is to find your personal mission and the selfless service that you can offer. That's
right now,
basically the trick.
well, my argument is that we all have the same mission,
Hmm.
and the same mission. We are all put here on Earth to be to go through what I call the hero's journey. I talk about it a lot in my Business Secrets book. The monks led me on the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a movement from selfishness to selflessness. Every child starts out screaming, mine, 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 mine. And everybody, we move along this arc from selfish. Now, our individual, that's our mission. Our individual goals and objectives and lifestyle can be completely, there's 4 billion of us or whatever on the planet. There's going to be 4 billion of those. You can be a doctor, or a lawyer, an Indian chief, a radio host, an author, or a farmer, or whatever. But no matter in what context, those are just the details. That's the surface stuff.
Hmm.
Where the purpose, your purpose is to evolve to become a selfless human being.
Mm.
And you don't learn this. An alcoholic does not learn how to be sober. The alcoholic must become sober. He goes through the 12-step program where there's a becoming. A caterpillar does not learn how to be a butterfly. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly. An acorn doesn't learn how to be an oak. An acorn becomes an oak.
Mm.
Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do.
Mm.
Excellence is not a choice. Excellence is a habit. You
Hmm.
become an excellent human being. You become a loving person. You become a better person.
Mm.
And you do that by exercising, by doing things for other people over and over and over again until it becomes. And people say to me, well, how does that apply to business? That doesn't apply to business. That's not going to work in business. BS. I said, what is a leader supposed to do? I said, as a leader, I'm not supposed to worry about getting myself promoted. Most people who are leaders, that's what they're doing. They're doing it because they want to be promoted, because they want adulation or whatever. No, the purpose of a leader, my job as a leader, is to get you promoted.
Mm-hmm.
to get Sally promoted, to get Jimmy promoted. And the ironic, paradoxical thing is the better job I do at getting others promoted, the faster I get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
I was a good enough salesman that I was on the cover of Selling Magazine at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And what I know from all my selling experiences, the more I forget about myself, forget about making money, forget about commissions, forget about quotas, and forget about the product, and instead focus fanatically on selflessly helping my customer, the more sales I make.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we think we want in life is the trailing indicator. It's the byproduct
Mm-hmm.
of living the right kind of life. And what is the right kind of life? Service and selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
Service, selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the same mission in life: service and selflessness. And if you don't agree with me, you're just wrong. And that's what I try to
Okay,
prove.
I
I try to
see.
prove. I try to prove that in my book by saying, listen, if you look at the movies that we spend billions of dollars to go see, are all movies about somebody like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, starting off as a selfish snot. By the end of the movie, he's a selfless person. This same movie has been done a million times.
Right.
The hero starts, Mr. Scrooge.
Groundhog Day or whatever. It's always the
Mr.
same.
Scrooge wakes
Yeah.
up on Christmas morning. For he's been a selfish, you know what? Now he's selfless. We love these stories. We spend billions to go watch them over and over and over again. Why? Because that's what we want to do. That's the trip we
Can,
want
can
to
can I
make.
make an amendment to what you're saying? I agree with what you're saying, but I am going to make a slight amendment just to have it be more digestible for folks because I think that okay, I want to answer Ralph's question and Sally who answered. So the first question was, how do we figure out our fatal flaw? And I just want to we're backtracking a little bit. And the fatal flaw is the thing that makes you, maybe it made you great before and now makes you suffer. It's
That's a great
something,
answer.
yeah, so I think that that would be my answer to that. Sally asked, so if you do nothing for yourself, you're nothing. And I think that here's how I'm digesting the pieces that you've given me. I think we all start egocentric, and some would argue, psychologists would probably argue that we need to have a healthy ego development so that we can actually not give our toys away to everyone and be lost and confused because we have no individual boundary. So maybe we start off as a separated identity from other people, and then as we evolve and transcend, I'm just knitting together in my mind, as we evolve
Hmm.
and transcend to higher places where we're understanding that ourselves and we love ourselves and we can appreciate ourselves, we fill ourselves with love so much that we are filled with an overabundance of love that we are to give back. I mean, all I can say is from as a mother who is probably the most selfless of, and a father, but I can say myself, my personal experience as a mother is I never realized how much I could give without expecting anything in return until becoming a mother. You just give and you never expect. You ideally want some thanks, but sometimes you don't even get that, right? So you give and you
Well,
give.
that's the actual story that I told him, Brother John.
Yeah.
That I had a friend, and his wife was badgering him to have a child,
Hmm.
and he was thinking all he could think about is no more sports car, bigger life insurance policy,
Hmm.
in-laws in every bed and couch, getting up in the middle of the night, dirty diapers, no more spontaneous weekends. That's all he could think about.
Yeah.
And then I said, then one day his wife handed him his newborn son. I said, and now an alchemy took place, a transformation. He melted. Now he became this utterly new human being who now he was the one keeping the baby awake because he was checking on the baby 50,000 times a night. And the baby couldn't sleep, and all he could care about was the baby. And he said it was a miracle. Now, this is something that almost everybody can understand,
Hmm.
but there's also a super melting
Okay.
where you just melt for the universe. And we all have experienced this to some. I remember when the Beatles album Abbey Road came out, and I put it on the record player back when there was record players, and I started listening. I thought, oh my God, this is so great. Within 2 minutes, I had taken it off the record player. I didn't listen to it all the way to the end. I took it down the hall because I wanted to share it with other people. I wanted to turn other people. I got more pleasure out of turning other people on than I would get by hoarding it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
There is a but getting back to what point that they make, there's nothing selfish about making sure that you stay healthy, that making sure you have a good ego. As a matter of fact, or that parents have their a date night. It's critically important that parents take care of themselves so they'll be better able to be parents,
Right.
so that they're healthy. That's not egotism at all. That's not selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of being selfless is making sure that. But there's a great story that I heard a minister say one time. He said, "What is the difference between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea?" And he said, "Think about it." He said, "They're both fed by the Jordan River." And I've been to Israel, so I've seen them both too. He said, "They're both fed." He said, "But the Sea of Galilee is alive and full of fish and fresh water, and you can
Mm-hmm.
drink it." He said, "But the Dead Sea is dead and nothing lives there, and it's all salt and everything." He said, "So what's the difference?" He said, "All the water that comes in one side of the Sea of Galilee is given away. But when it gets to the Dead Sea keeps it all for itself."
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lesson there. The more you give away, it's like credit. If you're in an organization and you give away the credit, rather than hoarding credit, the more credit you give away, the more it bounces back to you. The more people want to help you, the more people want to work with you, the more people want to be part of your team, the more people turn to you for leadership and advice, and the faster you get promoted. The jerks who hoard all the credit for themselves, like the Dead Sea, selfishly, they fail.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
getting back to the another thing I'd add to, and I liked your point, by the way, of how do you know what your greatest flaw is? Believe me, everybody that's around you knows what it is.
Just ask them.
Just ask them. Your wife knows what it is. I guarantee your wife knows what it is.
Okay, so I have a question to follow up on that. So as I'm hearing you, it's basically like find out what your unique way to serve would be. You know, whether it's a radio show or teaching or writing books or, you know, whatever it is, find out your unique way. That's your purpose for giving.
Let
But
me let me just add one. Let me
yeah,
add one little twist here.
yes.
And I'm always telling stories. I asked this guy one time. I said, who was my mentor and a serial entrepreneur. I said, "What do you do all day long?" He said, "Most of the time, what I do is I break up meetings, screaming at the top of my lungs. Don't sit there trying to figure it out. Get off your butt. Get out there and find out."
Mm,
So what I want to add to that is it's not something you figure out, it's something you find out. You did use the word find out, and that's what I want to use. Find out by action. Get off your butt. Get out there, volunteer for things, do things, put yourself in play, get around other people, ask other people for advice. Live your mission. So if you're just seeking and searching, you don't seek and search in your darn bedroom sitting in a corner
right,
waiting for the light to come on. No,
right.
you get out there and you do stuff. And you and I used to try. In my life, I've traveled hundreds of miles just to meet somebody I thought might be able to give me 30 seconds of good advice.
Right. It's just by doing. It's
It's
the
doing.
action.
It's
But it's
doing.
doing not out of, and here's the thing that I wanted to ask, because I think when I hear this, sorry to say, there's a bunch of people in the spiritual community that are like, I'm do this, I'm good. It's like they're trying to build up karma points, like it's a game. You know, it's like, I got 100 points. You know, how many
No, no,
points
no,
do
no.
you
We're
have?
not talking about.
Yeah,
We're
there's
not
like,
talking about that at all.
yeah, because I
I
just
mean,
want, because I can see people listening and saying like, I'm selfless because I gave all this stuff and then I did this stuff, and they're kind of giving to getting, and I think that that's kind of, it's confusing because I can hear what you're saying and
but
think,
even there, there's a great line from in Hamlet when Hamlet is trying to embarrass his mother for being basically a slut,
mm-hmm,
because he considers her a slut because she jumped onto his uncle, and he says, even if you're not virtuous now, act as if you were, and maybe over time it'll start to take.
So even if
And
you're giving to getting, it's okay. Just do it and
you're going to
see.
find you're going to be end up frustrated because you're going to find out it doesn't work. And that's going to be knowledge, but again, if you are if you surround yourself with a community of people who are committed to telling each other the truth, you'll save yourself a lot of time. But
Mm.
it's a scary proposition because most communities are my old Zen teacher called them mutually modulated conspiracies of mediocrity, where I won't call you on your stuff if you don't call me on my stuff.
Right.
So all we'll do is we'll just stroke each other. Oh, you're wonderful. Oh, no, you're wonderful. Oh, you're even more wonderful. I just came from a conference. It was a Catholic conference, as a matter of fact, called Napa in California. A guy gave a really stirring speech. And no. He said, we got this attitude that telling people the truth and giving constructive criticism is not nice. We
Mm-hmm.
got to get over that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's a lot of skill involved in giving bad news in a good way. And there's no excuse for not being really polite in the way you approach it. But people need to hear the truth.
Mm.
And we've got to be open to the truth, and we've got to welcome the truth and want to hear the truth.
People are
And we live.
so grateful when you do tell them the truth. As a coach, people come and hire me and they're like, I don't know why I'm not getting hired. What's happening? No one will tell me. And then I'll say, I'll tell you. My
Yeah,
perspective based on listening is you're too verbose. And they're like,
yeah.
oh my God, thank you. Show me how to be concise. They just, no one will tell them. And so they go and they're like, you're doing great. You're fine. Don't worry
I
about
think
it.
I think that's true. I think that's true. Some of that. I remember seeing a spiritual teacher one time, and I don't remember anything else he said, but I love this comment. He said, I have a bad habit. I tend to tell people the truth, and that engenders rage.
I don't think like this person was not rageful. They were
Well,
just
you
so
can look right
thankful.
now at our college campuses with all the snowflakes and all the people enraged because somebody said something that hurt their feelings or whatever the heck. I mean, we've gotten trigger warnings, and I can't hear this, and if I come across this word in the Mark Twain's book, I can't read Mark Twain. There's a lot of people have a difficult time. Facing the truth. I mean, look at alcohol. I mean, we look at alcoholics and we think, how can these people still deny that they're alcoholics
Hmm.
when they're basically waking up in the gutter every morning, and then they'll look it right in the eye and deny it. But the funny thing is we're on a continuum.
Hmm.
We can see them clearly because they're so mired in defensiveness or as Stuart Smalley used to say on Saturday Night Live, denial is not just a river in Egypt. Um, and so it's very difficult for us to face the things that we need to face in our lives. Why? Because it really usually is going to mean some kind of a change.
Hmm.
I mean, to really admit to ourselves that this job is
Hmm.
killing me
Mm.
means going home and telling your wife that you're going to quit this job, and maybe she's going to leave you, and who's going to support the kids, and blah, 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 blah. We don't, so we'd much rather pretend that, oh, well, it's getting better and we're going to get better.
Okay, here's my executive summary of our
All right.
conversation thus far. so, so when you are hitting your fatal flaw, a challenge, depression, whatever, things are changing. The first thing is to ask others for the truth, and really the truth, and be okay and open to listening to it. And you don't have to accept other people's truths if it doesn't ring
No.
for you. Just let it go. And then the second is to be willing to change, is what I just heard you say. It's really important that when you do ask for the truth, trying to be open and be willing to receive the truth and change what you can or see the truth in it for you. And then ask. There's like this first level of question, which is like, my knee hurts, my ankle hurts, I lost my job. But then ask what the deeper question is within that.
Exactly.
And then I'm hearing when you do that, you can ask your community again for help. But then also, it's about giving back to the community. If you don't know what it is, just start giving back. And you fake it until you make it. We're going to believe that your presupposition is true, that when you give, you'll feel more gratitude, more happy. And so just try it. Just what do you got to lose? Just try
Exactly.
try something that makes You happy,
And
that gives other
that's
people
that's how
happiness.
AA works. You know, when a counselor says to the, hey, you've been a drunk for 30 years. How's that working out?
Exactly.
Are you ready to try something else? Why don't we try not drinking
Yes.
and see how that works? I mentioned this in Business Secrets of the Trappist Monk. I spent my most of my life trying to build communities and maintain communities. I really, and of course, what is the key to the Trappist monks' success? They're a community,
Hmm.
and they're not only just a community; they're all in community. They've
Hmm.
dedicated their lives to their community.
Hmm.
But the reason why most communities in America cannot function don't function for very long is that most people think that community it's all one way, that the community exists to help individuals,
Mm.
and all of the compassion flows from the community to the individual and not from the individual to the community. Now, I'll give you an example from my own life in order to illustrate this. I had a community of people that used to meet at my house. It just grew organically. There was like 30 or 35 people that would come to my house every Friday night. So we said we got to start making this a little bit more formal. So we're going to have one of the things we're going to do is have a treasury, and we're going to throw $5 in from everybody every week to start, so we can maybe do some bigger things with it. Have this money. So I didn't want to be charged with the money, so I asked for a treasurer to volunteer. And this Kenny graduate volunteered to be the treasurer. And afterwards, he came up to me and said, "Under one condition, I'll be the treasurer." And I said, "What is that?" He said, "If somebody shows up here on Friday night and they don't have their $5, that's what it was." He said, "I don't want to have to turn them away at the door." And I said, "I want to be compassionate. I don't want to turn them away." I said, "Well, you can't be the treasurer." And he was really stunned. He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We're not a movie theater. We're a brotherhood." And I said, "That's exactly right. Nobody would even dare show up at the movie theater without their $5 or their $20, as a matter of fact." I said, "So why would they come to their brothers without their $5? Why
Mm.
would they treat their spiritual brotherhood with less respect than they would treat a movie theater?"
Mm.
I said, "We're supposed to hold ourselves to a higher standard, not a
Mm.
lower standard." I
Mm.
said, "And you are the." By the way, he said that he would keep a tally, and if somebody left the community with a running balance, he would actually make it up out of his own pocket. And I said, "I really admire you for being willing to do that." I said, "But you represent the community. You are a figure of the community. I want the compassion flowing to you to make your job as easy as possible. You volunteered to do work for the community. Our job is to make your job as easy as we possibly can, not as hard as we can." I said, "Now, if there's somebody in this community that just doesn't have $5 for whatever reasons," I said, "we can work with that. But just saying, 'Oh, I forgot my wallet, and because of compassion, you should let me in anyway because we're spiritual," I said, "That ain't gonna cut it."
I love it. That's the best
And
ever.
he was and I say in my book, I said, he looked at me with he got big eyes, and it was that classic, "I never thought of it that way before." And he became the treasurer, and he did a really good job as the treasurer.
Mm.
But when I work with communities, this is the problem that you always have. And
Mm.
by the way, this is a problem in when I do consulting in nonprofit corporations. All the compassion is supposed to flow from the community
Mm.
to individuals in the organization, so that we got to cut these people slack. No, 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 no. If you believe in the mission of the organization, cut the organization slack. If
Mm.
you believe in what the community is trying to accomplish, then it's your job as an individual to cut the community. And so the arrows go both ways. I'm not saying that the community shouldn't try to help the individuals, but the individuals have got to. And we live in a society now where, so what ends up happening is that the individuals in the community, and I don't think they're bad people. I'm not saying they do this consciously, but it probably starts with helicopter parents and spoiled kids. But they suck the community dry, and after a
Right.
while, people get tired of making up for the people who don't pay, or the people who forget their wallets, and the people who don't show
Right,
up, and the
because
people.
it becomes unfair, and then it kind of erodes the loyalty and confidence that you build and trust that you build as part of the community. Those are
And one
excellent. Those are excellent. Thank you.
and the one other thing, and I heard this at the conference I just came from about community. He said he's talking about Christianity and Christian churches, and especially Catholic churches. He said, all of our studies have shown that the churches that are prospering are the ones that are what we. He said we can talk about Christianity light, or he said we can talk about all in. He
Mm.
said, and the ones that are prospering are the ones that require all in. The ones people want, and I'm going to actually write. I write for Forbes magazine, and my next article for Forbes is going to be, what is the difference between a super successful organization and a mediocre organization? And the super successful, the employees, the management, everybody's all in. And leadership is a process of of doing whatever you have to get people to go all in. But
Mm.
the final thing, and I want to say this to your listeners, and I'm going to be speaking about this, is if you what are we, look in the mirror and ask yourself, what are you all in about?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And and if your answer is nothing, really nothing, then then you're not really living. You're not really alive.
Mm.
Should be all in. Last point I'll make: I was in Russia, and I asked my Russian friend. I said, "I'd like to go to Volgograd, which is where the cataclysmic Battle of Stalingrad was fought. And like 2 million men lost their lives fighting the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II. It was the turning point of the war against Hitler." And he said, "Oh yeah, it'd be cool." He said, "We'll go down to Volgograd and we'll see the battlefield and everything." He said, he said, "There'll never be another Battle of Stalingrad." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because nobody believes in anything anymore that much that would fight that hard for it."
Mm. Mm. Wow,
And
that's interesting. It's true.
that was about 2 years ago. And I keep turning that over in my mind, thinking on the one hand, well, good. 2 million men died fighting for that little piece of land. On the other hand, if you don't have something you're willing to die for, are you really alive? I can answer only for myself. No. I mean, I have lived my life all in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I'm so glad, and the blessings or whatever that it did, because I'm all in. And I used to say to my college students all the time, I said, I used to start the year with, I'd say, so we're gonna have a discussion. We're gonna go around the room, and I'm gonna ask you a simple question: Are you taking life is a course? Are you taking it for credit, or are you just auditing?
Mm. All right, I have
You
a
know,
question for you about my current trip. All right, so I'm
Go
here's
ahead.
what I'm exploring. So in the Camino, it's a pilgrimage that people would take, the Camino de Santiago. It's one of the
Yeah.
three pilgrimages that Catholics take, and it's a pilgrimage at the end that consummates into Camino de Santiago, which is just like I don't know. There's burials of famous saints, and so the motto of the Camino is Camino your way. You do it the way that, and I'm going in for a recapitulation of letting go of what was and bringing forth what is my next 50 years of life, hopefully. I don't know if I hope in the next chapter of my life, right? I've lived the last 50 years. I spent 20 of it raising kids. I spent, 15 of it in the corporate world. And now what CJ is going to emerge. And the part that
Whatever
I,
CJ emerges, she'll be fired up.
that's true. That's always true. So the question is I'm looking at myself. I'm doing the Camino now because what I realize is that you do the Camino before the Camino. And what I've noticed about myself is I'm planning, like what to pack in my backpack. I know, like, I feel like I'm getting as prepared as I can for what to be expected and what I can't plan for and trying to plan for the unexpected, right? So it's this kind of massive planning endeavor. And part of me thinks, am I crazy? And part of me thinks, no, this is your essence and this is beautiful. And and on the trip, as I understand it, all sorts of things happen that you can't plan for. You send your bag ahead, it gets lost. You decide to carry your bag, you realize you can't carry your bag, you have to take a taxi. And so the question is, and I'm sure I remember the last time we spoke, you said that you give selflessly and then just things kind of emerge out of the ethers, which has been kind of what happens to me throughout my in the last 3 years. I don't even know why job opportunities just come out of the ethers, and I don't know why they come to me. I don't do anything to make them happen. They just happen. So I need some encouraging, inspiring story of which I know is in you about letting go of planning, doing the right amount of planning, and then letting life open to you and letting life emerge as the divine plan. I know you have an inspirational
All right,
story in there, okay?
I'm ready for that. As a matter of fact, I have a story from just today. As a matter of fact, I
Okay.
was we're doing a Ingram is the big book distributor, and Ingram is the company that supplies books to all the Amazon and all the bookstores, and they're doing a big Christmas push for Brother John for this Christmas, and I'm going to be at their meeting with all their top executives in a month and all this stuff. And so anyway, I just signed a deal with Audible Books, so I'm going to read Brother
Oh,
John
great.
for an Audible, and Audible's going to give it away as a promotional thing to get people to buy the book. Actually, so it's going to work for them. It's going to work for me. So the woman, the woman I'm working with, an executive at Audible, said, she said, I don't understand. She said, your book came out last Christmas for the first time. He said, what Ingram is doing for you, she said, is something and only an author could dream about when the book's just coming out. But now they're
Right.
doing it for an old book.
Right.
She said they're doing for a book that came out last year. She said, she said, oh my God, I would die if I could figure out how to get them to do that for one of our titles. She said, how did you do that? And I said, I don't know. I mean, it just happened. I said, I talk a lot in my book about happy accidents. Now, let me answer your question specifically. Everything in my life's happy, these happy accidents. How I became an author is a my whole third career, first career as a business, then second career as an entrepreneur, and third career as an author. All these things have just happened to me. But to me, the distinction that I make, and I make it in Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, I said, I've never planned. I said, I'm a really good planner. I mean, I can, like you do, I can plan very, very well. You can't manage 500 salesmen without a plan. I mean, you got
Right.
to have a sales plan, right?
Right.
I said, I was really good at planning, but I said, I've never had a plan for my life. I said,
Plan for like logistics, the sales
I
goals,
plan
whatever.
for logistics and all I really believe in logistical planning.
Mm.
I look both ways before I cross the street. That's a plan. Um,
Okay.
Um, but I said but I never had a plan for my life. What I had was a mission.
Mm.
I've never altered from my mission my whole life.
Mm.
I said in Business Secrets, I said I wanted self-transcendence. I wanted to be the best person I could be. I wanted personal growth. I wanted, there's a million words for it. I wanted spirituality. I wanted God. I wanted the truth. I don't know how, there's a million words for it, and they all mean the same. I wanted enlightenment. I wanted
Mm.
cosmic consciousness. And I never varied. And I said in my, so fanatically hang on to your mission, but don't worry about plan. The plans will come out. I mean, I asked my Zen teacher one time, who was the most spiritual man I've ever met in my life, what the secret to his success spiritually was, and he looked at me and he said, "It wasn't what I did, it was what I didn't do." And he walked away, and that was my Zen koan. It took me years and of thinking about that and thinking about that. What did he mean? It wasn't what he did, it was what he didn't do. And so I started a chapter in my book, Business Secrets, with that koan. And then at the very end, I said, now after all these years, I know what my Zen teacher didn't do. He
Mm-hmm.
never sold out.
Mm.
He
Mm.
never compromised himself.
Mm.
He never sold himself out. And when I look back at my life, I paid the price when the price needed to be paid. If I had to quit a job because I quit a job with a company called Adelphia. I had it made. My dad was apoplexy. I was making so much money I couldn't breathe. I had the company car, I had the company plane, I had the limousines, I had everything, but I didn't. They were not ethical. They were not running their company ethically.
Mm.
So I just quit. And my dad, even the years later, my dad was still saying the company was called Adelphia. Just think where you'd be if you were still with Adelphia. Then in 2000, the front page of the Wall Street Journal, they all got arrested. And so I went to my dad for unethical behavior. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, now we know. This was 15 years later. I said, Dad, now we know where I'd be if I had stayed with Adelphia. I said, I'd be in jail with these guys right now. So I have all these stories I said, I didn't, I was always under a lot of pressure from colleagues, from friends, from relatives, like my dad, he meant well,
Right.
but it was take the safe bet, do the sure thing, don't take risks, don't stick your neck out, don't
Mm.
don't go against this. Don't, here, this is the way the game's played. Play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Do the And I didn't. I followed my star,
Mm-hmm. I
and
love it.
my star led me into, and by the way, if your star isn't scaring the snot out of you half the time, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it's not really a star.
Right. Well, okay, so here's my mission is to live fully, to love fully, and to have fun. I mean, those are basically that's what gives me meaning. And so what I'm taking away from this is CJ, if you're doing those three things and you don't stray from those three things, if you plan the heck out of your bag and plan the heck out of like making sure you get a hotel and whatever, then it's okay. As long as like, am I living fully? Like, am I planning to the point that it's stifling, killing me? Nothing is happening on the trail.
Well, deep, you've come up with this planning thing several times in the time
Yeah,
we've been talking today.
yeah.
And there is, you know, um, I, I don't know you well enough to answer this, but I don't know how close your planning is to OCD. And because OCD is really just fear of death.
Hmm.
People who are truly OCD are trying to plan everything. I even saw that in my father. My father uh, was a compulsive saver and saving of money, and he wanted safety, he wanted security so much. His parents were immigrants and peasants, and so if that was part of it. But I realized, he really deep down inside thought if he just played his cards right, he'd never die. That,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
that because what is security? Security is something we don't want to die. What are surprises? Surprises are the things that come bursting in and possibly can kill us.
Hmm.
So so I think that on the one hand, I don't know you well enough, because one of the things that I always work in community when I'm doing work with people, and I say, what is your greatest fear? What is the biggest thing? What is holding you back? What is this? Not just the great. We talked about the greatest flaw today,
Hmm.
but there is only one thing that spiritual work is only one thing, and that is facing your fear.
Yeah, my greatest fear is that I didn't have any meaning or meaningful experiences in my life, and already like I've had so many meaningful experiences that literally, after I dropped my eldest son to college, I thought, I'm done. Like, I could just get hit by a car right now at this moment, and I actually would be fine. Because I
Yeah.
feel like I've lived, I mean, I've
Well, then
done
then then
everything
then
I
then then,
wanted.
then then I wouldn't worry about planning. I like, especially when I'm traveling. I don't like surprises. I'm like James Kirk in Star Trek.
In the same
It,
way, and then I'm like, if there's something wrong with me, but I don't know. Maybe it's like,
no, no. I mean, I don't. Especially the older you get too. I mean, I don't. I don't want to lose my phone. I travel with two phones now. I lost my phone twice. I
wow.
got it back both times. But when I realized how much of my life when I'm in New York City and everything's on my phone, and um, so now I'm traveling. I have a separate phone. It has a separate telephone number, but it has all the same information on it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so
smart.
if I lose the one phone, I have a backup phone. I like redundancy. I like to, um, my old Zen teacher used to say, what everybody really wants out of life is predictability.
Hmm.
What we really want to be able to is to predict the future. We want to be able to say that if I tell this joke, they're going to laugh.
Hmm.
And trauma, by definition, is when you predict something is going to happen and it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
Something completely different happens.
Hmm.
So we're always, and that's human beings are always trying to figure each other, and human beings are the most important things in our lives. So we're always trying to, and I always tell people this. I just told this story the other day. I was madly in love with this girl when I was living in New York City, and we were dating, and we were having so much fun and a great time. So finally, I organized this candlelight dinner at a restaurant called One If by Land, which was one of the most expensive restaurants. It might still be there, I don't know, in New York. And so we go to this dinner, and she's dressed to the nines, and I'm all dressed up in my suit. And at the propitious moment, I told her how I felt about her and how I was in love with her, and blah 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 blah. And she looked over at me and said, "I don't feel that way about you at all."
Oh, God. Ugh.
So guess what? This was not what I predicted was going to happen.
Mhm.
And so now I had to go back to the drawing board. What did I miss? What did I not see? What was
Mm.
it? What was it? Blah 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 blah. And this is how you get better and better and better about predicting the future. Um, and Getting back to your question about pressure too, he had a really incredible definition of character.
Mm.
He said that the character is how many things can you hold in your head at the same time and act on them all intelligently
Mm.
and do the right thing.
Mm.
So and that's just another way of saying how much pressure can you take.
Mm. Mm.
I remember some woman arguing that janitors at companies should make more than the CEO because the janitor burns more calories in a day than the CEO does. And I thought, how ridiculous. She was a professor too at North Carolina State University. I said, how ridiculous. The CEO gets paid for how much pressure he can take.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands and thousands of details, thousands of factors. We call them factors, and he's got to sort through them all and know which ones are the essential ones and then which ones are going to. It's like I was sort of thinking immediately when you said that you wanted to live a life of complete love and you also wanted to have fun. I said, what happens if the love's not fun? Then what do
Right.
you do?
Yeah.
That's the way my head works. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
thinking
good.
of the fact. I'm thinking of the factors,
Yeah.
and not, it's not necessarily being a great person, not necessarily fun all the time. But so
I
it's
just
how much
strive for 1 out of 3.
good for you.
If I can 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3, that's great. But 1 out of 3, like I'm just striving for some combination of those three because you can't always get all 3 for 3.
You can't always get what you want.
But
Is
you
the
get
rule.
what you need for
That's
sure.
right.
You just what you get what you need. I
Well, listen,
completely
I've really, really
Me
enjoyed talking
too.
to you.
And let
It's
me
been
just
a
wrap up. So we've been talking to August Turak about his book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monk. Thank you so much for
thank
staying a
you
little
so
bit
much,
later too.
TJ. Hope
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.